But yeah, as
Yeah.
go ahead and with your
So
first
we
story.
yeah, got it. So we have a couple of sports things that we're going to be talking about today. I'll start with mine first, and for those who are I don't know who are tuning in for the first time, one of the sports that I enjoy the most is I love NASCAR quite a bit. I know it's maybe not a that's not a very popular thing, especially out on the West Coast. Um, but I've been a dedicated fan since I was about 3 or 4 years old, and so I've seen the sport has changed quite a bit. But that's neither here nor there. But this weekend was one of the what are considered the crown jewel events of NASCAR, and the race. It was the race this past weekend. It was kind of they've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years kind of a throwback weekend for one of their oldest races, the Southern 500 in Darlington, South Carolina. And they moved it. This race has historically always been Labor Day weekend, and there was a period of time where they took it away from the Labor Day weekend because fans weren't turning out, and they wanted to move that date to other markets, whatever. But a few years ago, they brought it back to Labor Day weekend, and since they've done that, they've done a celebration of the history of the sport, and they've so all the drivers, all the sponsors have come together, and they've paid homage to the history of the sport by running a ton of retro paint schemes that celebrate past stars of the sport. And people like they'll have they'll have retro fire suits, they'll have retro paint schemes. They'll even people have even gone where they'll grow facial hair like the old stars used to have, or they'll wear wigs and kind of do the kind of have fun with it. So this that was uh, so watching the race this weekend, nearly all the drivers had all these retro paint schemes, and the cool thing about you know that whole it was just a the race was great. The racing there has always been good. It's one of those racetracks where the surface is very rough, the tires wear out quickly, so there's always your drivers are trying to manage their tires. They're what is called racing the racetrack, because if you overstep you try to do more than the car will allow, you're they'll you're in the wall, and so you're racing hard, yet you're also like trying to not wreck at the same time. So there's a lot of that, and I just I something I like about NASCAR that I don't think a lot of people get. It's like, oh well, it's just people going around in circles, but there's a ton of history. It's not just about like the racing itself. I mean, obviously that's the main point, but NASCAR has a ton of history. Like this race in particular, they've been racing at this particular racetrack. It was the first racetrack that was over half a mile in length. It was the first racetrack that was paved that they raced at, fully paved racetrack that they raced at. It was the first race that was over 200 miles that they would race at, and what was the and yeah, so they've been racing there since 1950. So they've been racing there for almost 70. This one racetrack. They've had some of the another fun distinction about this particular racetrack. They had there was one race where they've had the largest margin of victory, which was 14 laps ahead of it's the second first and second place, or the first place driver won by 14 laps, and it also had the closest margin of victory in NASCAR history, which was two thousandths of a second. So pretty much like 6 inches, just maybe like an inch was the margin of victory.
Wow.
So yeah, and I encourage you, if you want to watch a great finish, check out the 2003 Trans-South Financial 400, or maybe it was I forget who the sponsor of that race was, but 2003 Darlington finish between Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven, easily one of the greatest finishes ever in NASCAR. There's a lot of them, but that one is, man, talk about edge of your seat action. That's if you don't like that, like, it's just you don't have a pulse.
That sounds I know NASCAR doesn't get the the recognition that some of the other like premier sports do, but it's just because I'm kind of like a history nerd, and I always enjoy sometimes I enjoy the history of something more than I enjoy the thing in and of itself. And the whole NASCAR spawning from like moonshiner and run runners.
Yep.
That's always fascinating to me, because so NASCAR is literally an outlaw sport.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's the only sport that I know of that where they pray before the start of a race. I mean, every opening ceremonies, it starts with prayer, and it's one of the few sports where all the stars, they're all very patriotic. The particular driver that won this particular weekend, he's not my favorite driver. He's actually he's a driver that
who are you talking about?
The driver who won this weekend was Brad Keselowski.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand him as a driver. I don't like his personality. But one thing I do respect about him a lot is that he does a lot of charity work. His foundation does a lot for wounded veterans.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of stuff for the military. And he always celebrates his victories. He does a burnout, but he has a giant American flag that he gets from his team, sticks that in his car, and just he celebrates America when he wins. So in that sense, I respect him a lot as for doing that.
He's a jerk. He's a jerk with a heart of gold.
Exactly. It's one of those things where I don't hate the person, but there is kind of a personality, the racing personality I don't care for, because it's kind of, he usually ends up tangling a lot with the drivers that I like. So, but just as a person and like what he does in general, I think is really awesome. And a lot of the drivers are like that. They're all very, a lot of the causes that they do, a lot of stuff with like children or veterans, or a lot of different stuff that they do to help out people in need, which is great. And but no, this particular race, it's kind of cool that there's not too many sports that pay homage to the past and realize that there was something that came before the time that they were born. A lot of the people that are in the sport care about its history and both its past and its future. Maybe baseball would be kind of like that too. I think the way that they keep track of statistics, like they do in baseball, kind of pays homage to its past and why the numbers in baseball are so important. But I think that's what's unique about about those sports is it's always they're always moving forward, they're always changing, yet at the same time they're not just forgetting about the past or caring about the past.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great weekend where they're celebrating celebrating the past while looking towards the future. It's a great it's a great race, and it's kind of cool to go back and remember all
Right.
those
So
great.
so they're bridging the gap as it were. So like
Exactly, yeah.
looking to the future while paying homage to the past. Especially taking
Right.
place at that that racetrack that has like so much significance, historical significance to the sport.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I can respect that.
yeah.
I can
So
respect that.
it was a lot of it just and for me as a fan, I love it because like, oh man, I remember this paint scheme from like they had stuff from like 1990, or these old paint schemes. Like, man, it's cool, and like they got it, they pretty much got it pretty accurate. uh, so that was kind of cool, and it's just it was a fun weekend for the sport. And it's part of the reason why I love the sport, so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it was because I was watching it with a good friend of mine, and we were watching it live. It was Sunday night was the race, and something that we noticed that was kind of I think is personally kind of cool is they have the the opening ceremonies, the invocation by some pastor from a local church in that area,
Mm-hmm.
and after the prayer, everyone like the entire crowd. It was a sold out show too. Everyone and everyone is saying amen. Like it was loud. It was like, wow, you don't see
Yeah.
that
So
at
it's kind of like going to church.
yeah. And most of the people, I mean, it's South Carolina, so a lot of people wear, whatever their belief system is, they usually go to church, as
Right.
whether how hardcore they are as a believer, but at least a lot of them do go to church,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just really interesting that maybe it has to do with it. It is a dangerous sport. There's a lot of danger involved, and death does play. Unfortunately, is kind of
Yeah.
does
It's
play
part.
a
It's part of the
factor.
sport. It's part of the sport. It's
So
yeah.
maybe that has to do with it, and it also could just be the values of from where the sport started, and even though it's expanded into other markets
Mm-hmm.
other than the Bible Belt, but every race, that's exactly what happens. But it's kind of it's a cool sport. Especially if you're a conservative, or you like history, or you like good stories. I find NASCAR to be might be the sport for you. Maybe you haven't checked it out before. I definitely encourage people who are watching, go to a race, man. It's fun. They especially, there's a lot of cool like tailgating that goes on if you go take your motorhome to one of the infields, or hang out early, or even if just going on race day, just grabbing getting a beer, getting some stuff to eat. All the racetracks have some good stuff to eat at. Every racetrack is unique, and they do a ton of service to every racetrack does a ton of service for the fans. There's a lot of cool stuff to do, stuff to see, and it's one of the few sports that, like, even on race day, the drivers are giving access to the fans, even up until just before they're called to their cars to before the race starts. I mean, they're signing autographs, they're talking to fans, so there's a lot of like good access to for fans, which is unique from any sport.
Cool.
So yeah, great weekend, And unfortunately, there was some some bad news for the sport starting today. Where the team that won the championship last year, one of their sponsors pulled out, and now they're shutting down operations. They're not going to be a team next year, which is they went from a team that was terrible at the bottom, and in less than about 10 years, they went from the absolute bottom to the pinnacle of being a champion, and now they're closing their doors because pretty sad to hear. So it puts a little bit of a damper on that weekend, but overall, I'm an advocate for NASCAR. I hope people come and watch.